Hello there and welcome friends. This will be a guide on all of the best mythic abilities and mythic feats in the game. The generic ones that is, so the ones any character including your companions have access to based on their class and also feat selection. I am not going to cover the actual mythic powers here, from the mythic paths like the Lich and Angel powers and spells, the Trickster mythic tricks, the Demon Demonic Rage, because I already have specific guides for each one of those. It doesn't need any saying that these mythic abilities and feats can make a massive difference when it comes to gameplay, both when it comes to highly increasing your attack bonus, damage, and also offering your characters a lot of different support. This guide will be divided on 4 different sections: the best mythic abilities and feats for melee characters, ranged characters, spellcasters, and also the best supportive and defensive ones. So without further ado, let's get started, first with the best mythic abilities for melee characters. For a melee character, the best one early on is certainly Ever Ready. I've already explained this many times, but attacks of opportunity and stacking attacks of opportunity is the way to inflict heavy melee damage in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. The more attacks of opportunity you have with your party members, the more free attacks you have, and the easier it is to defeat your enemies in a very short amount of time, usually just 1 or 2 rounds. And this mythic ability does just that. It enhances your attacks of opportunity even further. While the difference early on at Mythic Rank 1 is not that good, because this does scale in power with each of your Mythic levels for an extra +1 to attack rolls and damage rolls of your attacks of opportunity per Mythic ranks, so +10 at Mythic level 10. Even at the early Mythic levels, this does still increase the number of attacks of opportunity you can make each round by 2, which is very decent on its own. For a second great melee ability, we have Leading Strike. Whenever you hit a target in melee combat, you leave a mark on it, and any ally that attacks a marked target will gain a bonus of divine damage equal to 1d6 per your mythic rank to the target, consuming the mark. But of course, if you attack the target again, you proc the mark again and so on. So long as you have 2 melee characters attacking the enemy, you'll make great use of this ability. The damage of course is not that much in the early game, but becomes quite respectable as you level up, especially because it is divine damage which cannot be resisted at all. I prefer to leave this to just a single character, because only one ally can leave a mark on a target at a time. So ideally you want to have a character with a lot of attacks per round, keep leaving the mark on the enemy so your other allies can proc the mark by attacking. Other allies with Leading Strike will not do additional damage to a marked target, so honestly I just leave it to one. Elemental Barrage is also another amazing ability for melee characters. I know it says spells here, but the amusing part about this is that it is far better suited for physical characters, melee or ranged ones. Whenever you do energy damage to a creature, you apply an elemental mark to it, and if during the next 2 rounds you do damage of another source to a marked creature, your mark will explode, dealing 1d6 points of divine damage, so irresistible, per mythic rank to the enemy. That's up to 10d6. The beauty about this ability is that it works with elemental enchantments on your weapons, so classes like Magus, War Priest, Spirit Hunter like Amelia that can enchant their weapons with elemental damage multiple times. For example, a Magus can enchant with electricity, fire and cold, that's 3 elements. Just by attacking the enemy once with a single attack, because of your attack will do more than 2 elements, you already proc the Elemental Barrage. So that's basically like having Elemental Barrage on every single one of your hits. And it doesn't stop there. If your character actually has 4 sources of elemental damage, for lightning, fire, cold and acid, you can actually proc Elemental Barrage twice per attack, so yeah, it's extremely overpowered. I am not sure if eventually they're going to nerf this ability to only work with spells, but so far it does work with melee abilities, and that is where it shines. The problem of using this with spells is that it's not really optimal at all, because while melee and ranged characters can have a massive amount of attacks per round to easily proc Elemental Barrage, with multiple sources of elements on hit, a spellcaster usually can only cast 2 spells per round, and that's if you use a spell through a swift action from the Quicken Meta Magic feat or Quicken Meta Magic rods, or in the case of a demon with the aspect of the Colossus, while under Demonic Rage you can do 3 spells per round. Anyways, your damage from a spellcaster with Elemental Barrage will be minimal. At most you're going to proc it once per round. Meanwhile, a ranged or melee character can proc it on every single one of their attacks. Now if you are a character that has access to Rage, like a Barbarian, Blood Rager and so on, there's a few of them, Limitless Rage is amazing, because it makes your rages unlimited, So you just turn Rage on and it will be on for the rest of the entire game. You won't get the annoying fatigue debuff once Rage ends because it will always be on. And Rage effects can be quite powerful because they often stack with all sources of other boosts to your character, but most importantly the bonus to attack rolls and damage. Mythic Charge can also be a pretty great mythic ability. As you might already know from watching my videos, I really love the Charge ability, especially when you use it out of battle to catch the enemies unaware for a free attack while they are flat-footed. And I already have a guide linked to the site here on how to properly do this. But anyways, charging is great. There's all sorts of great boosts you can add to your charge, like with Cavalier for example, and Mounted Combat, for a massive increase to your charge damage, leading up to absurd amounts of damage just from a single charge action, especially when you combine it with the Pounce ability that barbarians and other classes with rage powers have access to, most importantly Skalds, who can actually share it with all of your party members, so that whenever you charge, you also full attack with all of your attacks at once. And this will increase your charge damage by 1d6 points of divine, so irresistible damage per mythic rank. Now I know we also have Thundering Blows and Unrelenting Assault, but I don't really find them useful. So to start with Thundering Blows, once per round, whenever your attack misses the enemy, they'll take 2d6 points plus 1d6 per 2 mythic ranks of sonic damage. Well, all of the enemies in a 10-foot radius of your initial target will take this damage. The problem is, it's not that high sonic damage and it's only once per round. Also, a lot of the enemies starting from chapter 4 onwards, so all of the demons you face, actually do have damage resistance against sonic damage. You might as well just go with Elemental Barrage and a class that has elemental enchantments for 10d6 per attack. The same for Unrelenting Assault. I mean, the bonuses might seem good at first glance. You gain a +2 stacking bonus on melee damage whenever you hit the enemy at least once. The issue is this is per round, so +2 on the first round, +4 on the second round, and so on, up to a maximum of +10 at the 5th round. The issue is, if you have a properly built party with lots of melee characters, most battles will be over in something like 1 to 2 rounds. You won't really get that much of a benefit from this mythic ability. Still, I would certainly choose it instead of Thundering Blows, because at the very least it will apply to all of your attacks. I suppose Brutality Incarnate might also be considered a melee ability because it does empower your natural attacks. The issue I have with this is that honestly, it's pretty useless. So it lets your natural attacks ignore all sources of damage reduction. But you know, who cares? You can just use the Covenant of the Inheritor Relic to basically do the same. The most common damage reduction in the game is against Cold Iron and Good, because that is the damage reduction demon enemies have. With the Covenant of the Inheritor Relic, you automatically bypass that, just like that. A very small amount of enemies have other sources of damage reduction, like Adamantine, but by the time you start facing these enemies, it doesn't matter, your damage is already off the charts. Certainly not enough that you would actually bother spending a mythic ability in Brutality Incarnate. Always a chance is somewhat situational at best too. Not having your attacks miss on a roll of 1 can be pretty useful, but you know, there's far better mythic abilities that you certainly want early on. And by the late game, you can just have Camellia or Amber use the Fortune Hex ability to highly shift the rolls in your favor. If you are any class that has access to Judgment like Inquisitor or the Divine Hound Hunter, you certainly want to go with Everlasting Judgment. This ability is simply amazing. You can now use your judgments any number of times per day. What this means is, you have unlimited uses of them, and that's it. You can use this on every single battle. The judgment bonuses are actually very powerful, and they do scale with your levels. Also, the higher your levels, you can also stack multiple judgments together, and I would certainly pick it as your first mythic ability if you are any class with judgment access. Now let's talk about mythic feats instead of mythic abilities for melee characters. First we have the mythic power attack line, which also works for mythic deadly aim and also mythic piranha strike. These feats all do the same. The only difference is that you need a different feat for each one of them, but their effect is the same. You take a penalty to your attack bonus, but receive a big increase in damage as a benefit. And with the mythic version, your bonus to damage increases to even higher. So that's a +3 bonus instead of +2. With higher increases, the higher your base attack bonus. These abilities are amazing for any character that has them, because you know, damage boosts are not as common as boosts to attack bonus. And as usual, you want to stack as much damage as you can. The penalty to attack bonus might seem scary at first, but it really isn't. As I've just said, it's very easy to stack your attack bonus to the max through the aid of buffs and abilities. The damage increase is certainly worth it, especially if you are a two-handed character, who then gets an even higher bonus from this. Dual wielders and ranged characters through either Deadly Aim or Piranha Strike don't gain as much, but for them the boost is still very useful. Second, we have the highly useful Mythic Improved Critical. Unlike the normal Improved Critical, this won't actually increase your critical range, so your chances of making a critical. What it does is actually increase your critical multiplier, so your critical damage. Weapons have all sorts of different critical multipliers. Usually they are around ×2 to ×4, and with this you can increase that by another ×1 for even higher damage. So a longsword, instead of just dealing twice the damage on a critical hit, will now do 3 times damage. Very useful, especially if you are a trickster character, but honestly useful for any character that has a high critical range weapon. This is the mythic ability that I always recommend you pick either at mythic rank 2 if you are a high base attack bonus character with a good critical weapon, or at mythic rank 4 for your other characters, melee and range ones of course. Mythic weapon fighting is pretty good if you are dual wielding as well, because it will completely eliminate the penalty you take on all of your attacks when dual wielding by 2. So instead of taking a -2, you won't take any penalty at all. Especially useful if you have a light weapon on your offhand, so you really won't get any penalty at all when dual wielding. And because dual wielding characters have a lot of attacks, and this does apply to all of your attacks, it's even more effective. Mythic Vital Strike can be pretty powerful too if you are a character focused on Vital Strike, of course. The issue I have with this is that, in my opinion, Vital Strike takes a long time to get a huge damage going. You need all of the Vital Strike feats, that's 3 feats, and then you also need Mythic Vital Strike. Usually, unless you are at the very early game with a Rowdy Rogue, I already have a build for it linked to the side here, that gains your first Vital Strike feat for free, and also gains the other ones earlier than even fighters, chances are you will be doing a lot more damage by just doing your full attacks per round. Still, Vital Strike can be useful for huge amounts of damage. If you are a dexterity based character, then you should also consider investing in Mythic Weapon Finesse, which lets you apply your dexterity modifier to damage instead of strength. This won't matter as much if you are, let's say, a rogue who can gain finesse training, but other classes like Amelia who cannot get it by default can benefit from this. But you can also rely on the Fencing Grace feat. The difference is with Mythic Weapon Finesse, well, it applies to all of your attacks even if you're dual wielding. Mythic Weapon Focus can be useful as well, but I would save them for fighter characters who can get greater weapon focus. The way this feat works is you double the bonuses to your attack rolls with weapon focus. Because most characters can only get the normal weapon focus, that's just +2. Meanwhile, if you are a fighter, you can also get greater weapon focus for +4 to your AB, which is pretty neat. Mythic weapon specialization, on the other hand, is great for any character even if you aren't a fighter. There are actually a lot of other classes like oracles and spirit hunters who can gain the weapon specialization feat even though they aren't fighters. What this mythic feat does is, whenever you use your chosen weapon, you gain a bonus equal to half your mythic ranks on damage rolls, so that's up to +5 at the max level. Notice how you don't actually need the greater weapon specialization feat, just having the normal weapon specialization is enough. If you are a character focused on tripping, then you can also consider the mythic trip to highly increase your trip attempt difficulty class. The same for Sunder Armor or Mythic Stunning Fist if you are a monk. Mythic Sneak Attacker can also increase your damage by a bit if you are any class that has sneak attack, but because we have a limited number of mythic feats, when it comes to mythic abilities you can actually spend a mythic feat to get another mythic ability. The same is not true for mythic feats. You only gain mythic feats at level 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10, so they are a lot more limited. I would actually save something like Mythic Sneak Attacker for the later levels, assuming you have the slot to spare for it. Now, melee characters can also benefit from the Destructive Shockwave mythic feat. The issue I have with this is that it's very situational and easily resisted by the enemy. Whenever you miss with a melee attack, notice there isn't a limit, so you can miss a lot of times per round and proc this feat every single time you miss. The enemy will still take damage equal to your strength bonus. This damage is easily reduced by the demon's physical resistance, so against Cold Iron Good, even if you have the Covenant of the Inheritor relic, they will still easily avoid this damage. The only saving grace is when you combine this with the Paladin Mark of Justice ability, because that will let your Destructive Shockwave completely avoid the demons and all of other enemies' physical resistance to damage, so they will take full damage and even gain more damage because your Paladin class levels will be added to this. So honestly, Unless you have a paladin on your party, I would not bother getting this mythic feat at all. Even then the use is still somewhat situational. Now let's talk about ranged mythic abilities. The first, and the one I always recommend you get first, so at mythic rank 1, is Cleaving Shot. Whenever you deal critical damage with your ranged weapon, or when you kill a target, you also deal your weapon damage to all of the other enemies in a 10-foot radius. And when it comes to weapon damage, it's not just your base weapon damage, you can also add some modifiers to it, so the damage will be pretty good. So it's basically a way to get your ranged attacks to deal area of effect damage. Because it has two conditions for proccing, critical damage and also killing the enemy, it can be very useful, especially if you are a trickster character or an ally empowered by a trickster main character, because you can increase your critical range with ranged weapons even higher, for up to 15 to 20. Second, we have Distracting Shots. Whenever you hit the enemy with a ranged weapon attack, they'll also take a penalty on their armor class against melee attacks equal to half your mythic rank for one round. I would save this for around mythic level 3, because this does get stronger with the more mythic levels you have. While it doesn't directly empower your ranged attacks, unless you have an entire party with ranged characters, which I suppose is somewhat rare and niche, chances are you also have a lot of melee characters on your party, probably more than the ranged characters, and this is going to help them hit the enemies, especially on hard and unfair where they have a lot more armor class. This penalty is untyped and will stack with other sources that reduce armor class, so very good. For another great ranged mythic ability we have the Bigger They Are. With this, you gain a bonus on your ranged attack rolls equal to the penalty to armor class that targets receives from their size. What this means is, if the target is of size large or bigger than large, and most of the powerful enemies are of these sizes, so size large, huge, you'll gain a bonus to your ranged attack rolls based on that. There is also the Ranging Shots abilities, but I don't find it that useful. Unlike the Bigger They Are, which is always in effect so long as you're fighting big targets, Ranging Shots works in a different way. Whenever you miss the enemy with a ranged weapon attack, you gain a +1 stacking bonus to your attack rolls against the same enemy. The issue I have with this is that every successful hit will also decrease the bonus by 1. There are so many ways of increasing your attack bonus in the game. You can easily get more than 60, 80, even 100, depending on how many buffs you have in your character for the tough enemies that really have high armor class. That I find is very situational, especially because usually you want Cleaving Shots, Distracting Shots, and then the Bigger They Are, so you won't really have much space for Ranging Shots. At the very least, you're probably just going to miss the enemy, gain a +1, hit them, reduce the bonus to 0, and that's it, you'll probably remain in this cycle. If you're missing the enemy a lot of times, chances are what you need to invest is buffs to your attack bonus instead of this mythic ability. Elemental Barrage, as I've just covered in the melee section, can also highly increase your ranged damage, but you will need sources of elemental damage added to your ranged attacks. A very easy example is the Magus Eldritch Archer class, and I already have a guide from them linked to the side here. And there are also some quivers of arrows you can find in the game that add a single source of elemental damage. At the very least, there is one that adds fire. A War Priest can also work for this. And of course, if you are a Spirit Hunter like Amelia. Lastly, for a ranged character, you might also consider Expose Vulnerability. The issue I have with this is that it only applies on your third hit and more with a ranged weapon, so every third hit against the same enemy will deal an additional 1d6 points per 2 mythic ranks of divine damage. Like I said, my pet peeve with this is that it takes a while for it to get going. Usually, if you are playing with a party member, by the time you get a third ranged attack on the enemy, at least on the same enemy, they'll be dead already. Now let's talk about mythic feats for ranged characters. As usual, you have Mythic Deadly Aim for even higher damage, Mythic Improved Critical as well, and also Mythic Rapid Shot. Because of the way Rapid Shot works, it gives you a -2 penalty to every single one of your attacks for the benefit of an extra attack per round. This feat can actually help you because it will work for every single one of your attacks, so long as you have Rapid Shot on, of course. Still, because we have more useful feats in my opinion to pick earlier, like Mythic Deadly Aim, which increases the damage of all your attacks, and if you are a fighter you might also consider picking Mythic Weapon Specialization and Mythic Weapon Focus. I do find Mythic Rapid Shot somewhat situational. We also have Mythic Point Blank Shot, but the bonus is pretty small, you know. The normal Point Blank Shot gives +1 to attack and damage. Mythic Point Blank Shot only gives a +2. I don't find it worth the feat investment considering how limited our Mythic feats are. Alright, now let's talk about mythic abilities for your caster characters. The first one should always be the abundant casting line. The benefit you get from this is immense. You gain 4 more whole casts of spells per day of your first, second and third level spells. This doesn't affect mythic spellbooks, which is another great boost of power for merged characters like Angel, Oracle, Cleric and Druids, also Lich, Wizards and Sorcerers, and Witches too. Because their mythic spells will be added to their main spellbook, so you will actually gain the benefit of abundant casting for all of them. Later on, this ability will upgrade to improved abundant casting, for more castings of level 4, 5 and 6, and also greater abundant casting for the same benefit, except to spell levels 7, 8 and 9. So eventually, by spending 3 mythic abilities, you can actually get 4 more whole casts of all spell levels. For another great caster mythic ability, we have the Enduring Spells line. The first one isn't really that good, what we really want is the second one, Greater Enduring Spells. So for the normal version, whenever you cast a spell on an ally that has higher than 1 hour duration, the duration will now become 24 hours. This doesn't have that much use because you know most of the spells don't have 1 hour duration. Usually spells like Mage Armor or also the 10 minutes per level spells, which will become 1 hour so long as you are at least level 6. The real power comes from the Greater Enduring Spells upgrade. Now, whenever you cast a spell that lasts longer than 5 minutes, which is pretty easy to do, the duration will be extended to 24 entire hours of real time. Buffs are one of the most important abilities in the game. You always need to have your characters fully buffed if you want to have a good time, especially on core, hard and unfair. And with this ability, well, your buffs will now last for the entire dungeon, and sometimes even when traveling through world map areas depending on how close they are to one another. I strongly recommend you pick this mythic line of abilities with your main buffing characters. I usually leave it for Camellia and also Darren. You might even consider picking it earlier than Abundant casting line of abilities, depending on the type of your character. So if you want to buff a character, for example, you can always go for Enduring and Greater Enduring as your first 2 mythic abilities, for mythic rank 1 and 2. Remember, you can always use a mythic feat to gain another mythic ability. Also, through Greater Enduring spells, you can even get spells that last only a single round per level to become 24 hours, that's right, but it is a bit situational. You need to be a merged angel or a merged lich in most cases, because they are the only ones who get a massive bonus to their caster level. To extend a 1 round spell to 24 hours duration, you will need to first achieve 25 caster level, so that your 1 round level spells last 2.5 minutes, and then you'll have to extend them through either the Extend Metamagic feat or Extend Metamagic rods, so that instead of 2.5 minutes they become 5 minutes, which then procs the Greater Enduring spells, turning that into 24 hours. Merged Liches can probably get it the earliest, and then Merged Angels. I suppose as far as the transmutation school for example Haste, non-merged mythic characters can also get it, like Brown Fur Transmuters, through the aid of your Arcane Reservoir to increase your caster level, and also some gear that increases the transmutation caster level you have. The issue is that this will take forever, like at chapter 5, the earliest, which is very endgame. Mythic Angels and Liches on the other hand can get this at around chapter 4. Spellcasters can also get the favorite Metamagic mythic ability, so you can select one of these Metamagic here. Unfortunately, this does not work with all Metamagic, which I think is probably an oversight. It only works with Empower, Extend, Maximize, Quicken, Reach and Bolstered. On the other hand, Selective and Persistent Spell are completely missing from this. Anyways, whenever you apply one of these Metamagic to your spells, the spell level cost will be reduced by 1, becoming even 0 in the case of Metamagic like Extend, Reach and Bolstered, because they only cost 1. This can be useful, but at the same time, casters are somewhat starved when it comes to mythic abilities, because first they need all of the abundant spell line, and you probably want the Greater Enduring too. There's also situational supportive abilities that I will talk in my supportive mythic abilities section, like Bloodline Ascendancy if you are a sorcerer, Second Bloodline and Second Mystery and so on. So I often don't really find a spot for this for my spellcasters. And you know, you can always just use Metamagic Rods, or just take the spell level cost anyways, it doesn't matter that much. I actually prefer to go without this because when it comes to Metamagic, you can actually increase not only the power of your spells, but also the amount of the spells you have per day. If you are a damage dealer caster focused on offensive spells, then you should also invest in the Ascendant Element mythic ability, The most common use of this is fire, either if you are, let's say, a kineticist focused on fire, or a damage dealer caster, because fire spells tend to be very powerful. Most importantly, Hellfire Ray, to be honest. But also electricity if you fancy that, because demons are immune to electricity damage, they only have fire resistance. The other ones are very situational, acid, cold, negative energy, and sonic. I honestly wouldn't bother with them. Unless you are a lich, because as a lich you have a lot of spells that deal very high negative energy damage, especially negative eruption. Now I know kineticists aren't really spellcasters, but you know, they use abilities that are pretty much magic, as far as thematics anyways. So when it comes to kineticist, well, I already have a guide explaining how to build a kineticist, both for a generic kineticist of any mythic path and also a demon kineticist. But anyways, for kineticist, what you really want is first kinetic overcharge, so that your gather power ability will reduce the burn cost of your blasts by 1 additional burn point, very useful. And later, over-infused blasts, so that you can apply 2 substance infusions to your kinetic blasts. For example, you can now have a kineticist blast with both pushing and also bowling infusion, so that your blast will both trip and also bow rush the enemy. Now let's talk about Mythic Feats for spellcasters. First we have Mythic Spell Penetration, which can help a lot if you're actually using spells that need to pierce enemy spell penetration, and a lot of the enemies in the game have it, like demons, as soon as the early game. First it lets you add half your mythic rank to your caster level checks, if you only have the normal spell penetration feat. On the other hand, if you have greater spell penetration, which you should have, you add full your mythic ranks instead, so it can mean up to plus 10 to your spell penetration score. Very useful. Second, we have Mythic Spell Focus. It increases your spell focus bonus by 1. So when you combine it with normal spell focus and greater spell focus, that's a plus 3 to the difficulty class of your spell school. And speaking about spell schools, you can also pick Expanded Arsenal to apply whatever bonuses you have from a school into another school. So let's say I started my game with Spell Focus, Conjuration, and Greater Spell Focus, Conjuration. I can then, through Expanded Arsenal, choose Illusion, and have all of those bonuses applied to the Illusion spell school. This mythic feat actually has a very cheesy use, in that you can keep getting spell focus in all sorts of different spell schools other than the one you really want, and then through the aid of Expanded Arsenal apply it to that school of choice. For example, let's say you want to make an illusionist. Contrary to all reason, you don't actually pick spell focus illusion through normal feat progression. What you do is pick spell focus in all sorts of other schools like abjuration, conjuration, divination, and so on. And then through the aid of Expanded Arsenal, you choose to apply it to illusion, so that your illusion spell's difficulty class get a massive boost based on all of the other spell focus you picked during normal progression. I personally think this is an oversight, and chances are it's going to get patched, but of course I could be wrong. After all, chances are this is just intended behavior, even though it works against all reason. Because at the end of the day, let's say you want to make a necromancer, do you think it makes sense for you to not pick spell focus in necromancy and instead picking a bunch of other schools you don't care about, only to then add to necromancy to Expanded Arsenal? I don't know, it seems a bit out there to me. But anyways, it's certainly a very powerful choice if you want to indulge in the smelly and very tasty cheese. The School Mastery feat is somewhat useless. Instead of increasing the difficulty class of a school of choice, it only increases your caster level. Most spells have capped caster level, and the ones that don't gain much of an increase by just increasing your caster level. Lastly, spellcasters can also get the very useful Sorcerer's Reflex mythic feat. It lets you cast the very first spell, only the very first spell, it's not once per round, it's only at the start of battle itself, as a swift action, if it's either a level 1 spell, or at the very least 2 levels lower than the maximum level of spells you can cast. So for most casters that's going to be level 1 to level 7 spells. This can be useful because, you know, even just a single spell as a swift action during battle can be powerful. For the subsequent rounds you can just use the Quicken Spell feat or Metamagic Rods for more swift actions. But because of the way this spell works, I would actually save it for your late mythic feats, something around level 8, because at this point you'll be able to cast all of the spells in the game already, or even level 6 if you prefer. Now for supportive and defensive mythic abilities, there's a lot of them too. First we have Archmage Armor, which increases the bonus to armor you receive from Mage Armor equal to your mythic level. So that's plus 10 at Mythic level 10, meaning your Mage Armor now increases your AC by plus 14, which is massive. This bonus can become so huge that even characters that aren't spellcasters like fighters and so on can benefit from this in the late game to highly increase their AC. It's important to note that you have to actually cast Mage Armor on yourself to benefit from this. If another character casts this on you, it's not going to work. And you might ask, how are we going to get it on melee and other characters that don't have access to Mage Armor? The answer is simple, just use Mage Armor potions, as they will be enough to proc this mythic ability. Second, we have Inspirational Leader. This is one of the best supportive mythic abilities. All of your allies within 50 feet of you, this also works for the character himself, will gain a bonus equal to half your mythic rank plus 1 to their initiative, and also their saving throws against mind affecting effects, and their concentration checks. This last part doesn't matter that much. The main benefit is the bonus to initiative and also saving throws. The higher your initiative, the higher your chances of acting before the enemy, which lets you of course kill them before they can do anything, and also catch them flat-footed, meaning they take a massive penalty to their armor class, so you can easily hit them. And the saving throw boost to mind affecting is always useful. Mind affecting effects are the most annoying status ailments like confusion, charm, and so on. And the best part is, this ability is always on, it's pretty much a passive. Now we also have Last Stand, of course, which is honestly probably the best by far of the defensive mythic abilities, but its uses are a lot better for melee characters or any other characters who will be at the front line, so at much higher risk of taking damage from the enemy. With Last Stand, whenever your hit points drop low, that is any value lower than 1, you will stay at 1 hit points for 2 whole rounds, and any damage you take during these rounds will do nothing to you because you will remain at 1 hit point. This is only once per rest, so if you are in a tough area, remember to rest if you end up proccing your Last Stand so you can later proc it again. I don't think it needs any saying that being unkillable for 2 whole rounds is amazing, especially because when the effect ends or before that, you can just heal your character, so they aren't at risk of dying when it finally ends. If you are playing a shapeshifter type of character, I already have builds both for a Druid Angel shapeshifter and also a Demon shapeshifter. Whenever you are under any shapeshifter effect, like a polymorph spell and so on, any spell that changes your shape, the bonus you get to your physical ability scores will be increased by a +4 untyped, so will stack with everything else. And amusingly enough, as far as this patch at least, this also works for Kitsune characters whenever they change from their Kitsune form to their human form. Mythical Beast is another great one for any class, and there's many classes with path access in Wrath of the Righteous. So not only will your animal companion gain a bonus to their physical scores, equal to half your mythic rank plus 1, so this will scale with your mythic levels, it also lets them ignore all sorts of damage reduction. If you are an oracle, you also have Second Mystery, which basically lets you pick another mystery besides the one you start out with at character creation. There's many uses of this, but my favorite mystery combos are Battle and then Nature. I already started with Nature, which is why Nature is not here. Nature is great for the access to the pet at level 1 and also the pet boosting aura. And last but not least, the Revelation that grants your Charisma modifier to your armor class, perfect for oracles who already have high charisma. Battle is another one of my favorites. The spell list is pretty solid, but also some of the revelations you can gain with Battle are very good, and I already have a guide for a Nature and Battle Oracle, which is my Angel Oracle build. Anyways, with Battle you can get triple your initiative rolls, while picking the best result to ensure you go first before the enemy. You also have access to some very powerful free combat feats like Improved Critical and Weapon Specialization. Overall it's a very solid mystery. The other ones I find kinda situational when it comes to Battle plus Nature. Life, which is the one Darren has, can be useful too. The spell list is very powerful with all of the healing and supportive spells you might want, for free. And some of the mysteries are good too. I know some people like the Unstoppable mythic ability, I don't find it that useful. Whenever you would become paralyzed, you become staggered instead, and if you would become nauseated, you become sickened, and if you would become frightened, you would become shaken instead. It's very easy to gain immunity to all of these annoying status ailments. For paralyzed, you have freedom of movement. For nauseated, you have delay poison communal or life bubble, and for frightened, you have the paladin aura of greater courage, or also greater heroism. The same for the Rupture Restraints mythic ability. So 3 times per day. The sad part is that you cannot really choose when to use this. It is automatically applied whenever you get hit with one of these status ailments. Frightened, dazed, sickened, shaken, staggered, nauseated, stunned, paralyzed, or confused. You can just become immune to all of them through spells. Like I said, Aura of Greater Courage and Greater Heroism for Frightened. For all of the mind-affecting spells here, you have Shield of Law when it comes to facing demons, and also some of the mythic powers like from Angel or Lich. For Confusion, we have Unbreakable Heart. So I don't see a point in spending a mythic ability with this. Just cast spells instead. You also have the abundant line of mythic abilities for classes like Magus with Arcane Pool, Inquisitor with Bane, Key for Monks, Smite for Paladins, and Smite Chaos for Hell Knights. I don't find these really needed. You often have enough uses of these abilities, and you can also increase some of them through gear. Not useful enough that you would actually spend a mythic ability, which are limited, on one of these. If you are a sorcerer or another class that has a bloodline, you might also consider Bloodline Ascendancy to further increase your powers. Most of these are rather useless. Demonic Might, Arcane Apotheosis, Ascension, all of the dragon ones. This ability only grants you your capstone bloodline ability, so the one you would gain at level 20. The ones that are the best are certainly the elemental ones with elemental body, because you actually gain immunity to both critical hit and also sneak attack. Plus the element of choice, the Serpentine Bloodline one for Scaled Soul, because if you are a shapeshifter character, you can gain the Naga form very early in the game, as early as level 5, which can be pretty fun for a form that you would only get at level 20 otherwise, which even has a neat Poison Fang ability on hit. I mean, Ascension, Demonic Might, the dragon ones, all they do is grant you immunity to an element and some milder damage resistance. You can easily get that through spells, so why bother? Slayers can also get defensive studied for an increase in their defenses. I would honestly only bother if you are a Slayer that is fighting directly at the front lines without access to reach weapons or reach spells, like for example a dual wielding Slayer like Greybore, because it will grant you a bonus to armor class equal to the amount you would gain from your attack rolls. This can mean something like +4 to +5 armor class later on, which can be decent if you want a very tanky Slayer character. Now we have Impossible Domain, and if you've watched some of my videos you already know this is one of the most busted mythic abilities in the game. With Impossible Domain, a class like a Cleric or Inquisitor can choose any domain in the game and gain access to all of its abilities, just like that. The best part is, you can gain this ability multiple times. My Social, for example, tends to have 3 to 4 mythic abilities just spent in Impossible Domain. That's how good this can be. The best ones are Community Domain for the extremely powerful Guarded Hearth, and also the Calming Touch ability, which is very rare in that it is actually a healing ability with uses per day that scales in power with your Wisdom modifier and also in uses per day, and can even remove Fatigue, Shaken, and Sicken, besides just healing you for a nice amount. Madness Domain is amazing as well for the Vision of Madness ability that lets you empower your character with a massive amount of untyped bonus equal to half your cleric level, that's +10 at max level, to either the attack rolls, saving throws, or skill checks. And this does also works as a debuff. You can reduce 2 of the enemy's scores, attack rolls, saving throws, or skill checks by the same amount, without a save. When it comes to debuffing the enemy, all you have to do is first hit them with a melee touch attack and also penetrate their spell resistance. Animal Domain is of extreme importance as well, because it does grant you an animal companion, and as you might already know from my guides, animal companions are extremely powerful in Wrath of the Righteous. They make a massive difference. Any party that has an animal companion is better for having it, especially in the early game, because at the very least they are almost the same as if having a free extra whole party slot for your group. That's how powerful they are, both when it comes to tanking, dealing damage, and even crowd control. Nobility can be pretty useful too, because of the Inspiring Command ability that buffs your entire party with a +2 Insight bonus, very rare, to attack rolls, armor class, combat maneuver defense, and also skill checks. Lastly, we have the Glory Domain. Its main use is basically a very cheesy ability called Touch of Glory. The issue I have with this is that at the moment it's a very overpowered and cheesy ability that doesn't work as the description states. Whenever you use this on an ally, They will receive a static, untyped bonus to their charisma equal to your entire class level, so that's plus 20 to charisma, which is insane. And unlike the description says, it will remain on forever and even work for spellcasting, and also all other sources of abilities and bonuses that are derived from charisma. I imagine this will be changed on future patches because at the moment, like I said, it does not work as the description states at all. By the description, it should only work for charisma-based skill checks or ability checks, and also it should only work once instead of being on for an indefinite amount of time. Talk about cheesy. If you are a class with access to bloodlines, you can certainly also go with second bloodline. Just like second spirit, this grants you an extra bloodline, and depending on the one you pick, it can make for a very big increase in power to your character. For example, you can pick one of the dragon bloodlines to have access to the dragon disciple prestige class, but there are all sorts of bonuses you can gain. If you are a spellcaster, for example, Arcane Bloodline will eventually give you free spells and even an increase in the difficulty class of your spells. If you are a Blood Rager, Serpentine Bloodline can give you a free bite attack, Fey Bloodline can increase the difficulty class of your enchantment spells, Abyssal Bloodline can give you a very big increase in strength. There are many bonuses for each of these bloodlines, but these are the main ones I believe. Lastly, for shamans like Amelia, you also get second spirit, which is just like the other abilities I've just said, gives you another spirit besides the one at level 1. There are some pretty powerful ones here. Nature can actually give you an animal companion, but unfortunately only at level 16 and higher. Battle, which is the one Camellia already starts with, has very powerful hexes to further reduce the enemy's armor class, and also pretty good abilities that give you weapon specialization and greater weapon focus. Lastly, the Stone Spirit is very powerful in that it gives you access to the Metal Curse hex, which further reduces the enemy's armor class by a massive amount without a save. Wind can also be useful because it does have the Air Barrier hex to further increase your armor class. Now, before ending this guide, let's talk about the Mythic Ascension abilities that any main character has access to during your first Mythic rank. Don't be afraid of picking a different first Ascension than that of your Mythic path later on, it doesn't really matter. You can, for example, pick the Bit of Fun, which is a Trickster thematic ability, and then become a Lich, an Angel, or anything that's not a Trickster. There is really no consequence. For first Ascension, there's 3 that really stand out in my opinion. The first is Bit of Fun, which is a Trickster thematic Ascension, as I just said. It has a minor mirror image effect, which can be good to protect characters on the front line that aren't spellcasters, and you can use this 3 times per day. But most importantly, it also gives you a +3 circumstance bonus to all of your skill checks, which can of course be of great help if you are a character focused on using skills. The second is Close to the Abyss, the Demon thematic ability. This is probably one of the best for melee characters focused on high strength like two-handers, because it actually gives you a gore attack, and the damage can actually become pretty high based on your strength and so on. So if you are a character that uses sneak attack, your sneak attack damage will also be applied to this gore. At the very least, this ability is an extra attack per round for your character. Lastly, we have Instrument of Freedom, the Azata thematic ability. The main benefit is buffing your party members. This ability won't work on yourself, with the Holy property for an extra 2d6 points of irresistible damage against evil enemies, so all of the enemies you face in the game really. The best part about this is that even though it doesn't have that high duration, both your uses per day and also the duration scale with each one of your mythic ranks. So before tough battles, it's always in your best interest to buff all of your party members with this, pets and ranged characters included, so long as they are attacking the enemy. I don't find the other mythic abilities that useful. I suppose you could say Dance Macabre can be good for the immunity to negative levels, but you know you can just cast Death Ward. As far as the channel ability to heal undead party members, Lich already has way better spells that let you do this. Close to the Heavens, which is the Angel one, can have its uses when it comes to healing your party members, because you heal them with a ranged touch attack, and the healing amount does scale with your mythic levels, but I don't find it that needed. You can just cast the healing spells. The nice thing about this ability is that you can also use it to hit the enemies with a ranged touch attack for irresistible damage, but the damage won't really be that great. So I would personally stick with Bit of Fun, Instrument of Freedom, or Close to the Abyss, depending on your playstyle. Alright, so this was it for my Mythic Abilities and Feats guide, everyone. So now I have complete guides for all of the best Arcane and Divine spells, and also the best Mythic Abilities and Feats, certainly enough to help you build any character you might want. Please remember to check my builds playlist if you want to know more about all of the builds I have explained in the channel so far. As usual, if you found this guide useful, then please remember to support the channel if you can by liking, subscribing, and even becoming a member to access some very exclusive and neat perks. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends!